Greetings and hello from a very cold, snowy winter day here in Hopalong Hollow. This is Jerry. We're going to do another video on the spun cotton animal figurines today. I'm going to talk about armatures and feet and adding wings and tails and beaks and that sort of thing. But I want to start out with the tea, because we started out with a new tea company last week, and I told you that each video we would introduce a new one. So once again, from the tea company, and this is called the Happy Kit. So we're going to open the box here and see what is inside. These make such great gifts for your tea-loving friends. And it opens, as I mentioned, it had great packaging. Really interesting packaging. And look at this packaging. This is great fun. So here we have a wonderful container. When this is gone, this is going to be great storage for keeping craft items. Look at that. The most beautiful thing of all is this beautiful cup. It's boastedly a limited edition. Beautiful cup. And that holds a lot of tea. And up here, and here in the upper level, you have 15 different teas in very colorful packages. Many different kinds. We've got pomegranate, green rose, creme brulee, sleep tight, gorgeous geisha, Melbourne breakfast. I'm thinking I might like to try this creme brulee. It is a sweet treat, velvety vanilla, plays with rich caramel and smooth hazelnuts in a gorgeously golden brew. Intense aroma that enhances a glorious infusion. I forgot to tell you in the last video, I'll give you a verdict on that tea we tried last week, which was Hot Cross Buns by the same tea company. It was really good. It was very strong and spicy. And you could really taste the ginger. And if you like ginger, it was just a perfect winter tea. So I'm thinking that would be a great addition to my winter teas. I usually drink Harney & Sons cinnamon spice tea in the winter. But that one is competitive with it. So if you want to give that a try, please do. We will give this a little bit of time. It's very dark. That's a good sign for me. And we will get on to our next little lesson. Before we begin, a little tip for you. When you make your cornstarch slurry, which is your binding agent, just make 1 cup at a time, or even a half a cup at a time, because this doesn't last for more than a few days. Being cornstarch, it will have a tendency to go bad. If it starts to have a bad odor to it, an unpleasant odor, throw it away, make some more. Generally, though, if you're going to be working on these all day long, you could use up the entire cup of binder slurry. So just a little hint for you. Today I want to start out with making armature. That's something some people find a little bit daunting. And so did I when I first started making sculptural figures, such as needle felting or clay. I used to sculpt in clay quite a bit. But it's really important, whatever kind of sculpting you're doing, to have a good base to work on. So these are just the little lightweight armatures, or skeletons as I like to call them, made out of pipe cleaner. Or you could use any kind of floral wire. I prefer to use the pipe cleaner, and that's the same thing I do with needle felting, although I use a very heavy wire with the needle felting. That's not necessary with these tiny, lightweight figures. So if you could just learn a few basics about making armature, it'll make things a lot easier and more pleasant, and you'll get more the shape that you're looking for when you're making your character. So here we have, this would be either a goose or swan. I put the feet, I've included the feet with it. Sometimes you can add those later. And here we have this is pretty easy to see what they are. They're just simple, very simple armatures. Here we have a giraffe. And here we have, this is going to be, I think, a donkey. And these are a lot larger than what I initially wanted to make. I want to get to the point where I'm making these very small. But I think by starting larger in a larger size, I can get the hang of doing this, and it'll help me out a lot when I go to a very small size. And you'll see what I'm talking about later on in the video. Here we have a leaping rabbit. And I think this is another one. This is a very simple armature. This could be all kinds of things. It could be a rabbit. It could be a squirrel, a chipmunk, a raccoon. Simply by adding a tail, a mouse, anything in that family. But you can see that it's just a very simple armature. But you can also do a little more complicated armature, which is what I'm doing here. I don't even know if I can remember how to make this armature because it was rather complicated. I just kept doing it and adding more and more skeletal additions, and this is going to be a cow. Because a cow is one of the things I really want to make. A lot of cows, and I want to make a lot of sheep. But we're going to start out with something simple that can be used to make all sorts of animals. Something as easy as this. And this could be any number of little creatures, depending on how you bend the wire. So in this case, this is going to be a squirrel. But you take the tail off, make it shorter, and it could be a rabbit. It could turn into a mouse. This could turn into a raccoon, a badger, a shrew, all sorts of little things. So we're going to start out with that. One thing as an artist that's important to do is to get some good images or models to look at, especially if you're doing animals. It will be very helpful for you in the long run to be able to look at the shape and the anatomy of a creature. I am going to be working on some pigs, and I was so happy that I had remembered that I had all these old images from an old set. Probably, this is, I don't know, 1930s, somewhere around that time. And I got all these great images of these pigs. And so when I'm going to be making a pig, and I tried to make a pig before I found these, and it didn't turn out so great. Where is that pig? I'll find him later and show him to you. If I'd have had these to look at, I could see the curve of the back, the length of the head, the length of the legs. This is so helpful. Any artist will tell you this. You really need something to look at. Oh, we're going to have to do some dogs eventually. And here, of course, lots of roosters, lots of chickens. Now, something else you could use would be little figurines, little toy figurines. Here I've got a couple cows. There's a goat. This is a little plaster dog. Some very small cast iron sheep. Eventually, I want to make my sheep a little bit bigger than that. And another small goat. I think that's a good size for a spun cotton goat. So all of these things just basically to give you an idea of the shape of the body, because you're not going in for some full-fledged sculpture here. That's not the point. Or it might be with you. It's just to get the shape of the body so the animal is recognizable even when it's not painted. So let's start out with this armature, because this armature could make so many different kinds of animals. This could be a sheep, depending on the length of the neck. It could be a leaping rabbit, depending on the way you put the arms. It could be, which I'm working on right here, this is going to be a chipmunk. I'll be cutting those off. This is still in the works. This is also still in the works, but believe it or not, this will become a rabbit. Here's one that's a little bit smaller, which I think could become a very small pig just by moving the legs around a little bit. and cutting off those pipe cleaners. This could be a horse, a sheep, a donkey, and even a pig. It just depends from here on out what you do with your cotton. So that's where you just have to use your imagination. So let's just learn this really simple armature right here. Okay, I'm going to start out with one of my 12-inch, and I'm going to do what we did with the ducks and the chickens. I'm going to make a little head. I think we'll make it about the same size as this, just because it's easier to make a larger armature. Make the size head that you want. I'm going to twist it around a bit to make a neck. Also, the neck is going to be dependent upon your animal. If you're going to be making a giraffe, obviously you're going to make a very long neck, or a llama, or a camel, long neck. If you're going to make a little chipmunk, there's barely a neck at all. This is something that you'll just learn how to do. Now you're going to take another 12-inch pipe cleaner, fold it in half, wrap it around the neck, and you're going to wrap it a couple times around each of the arms. It's going to make your shoulders. Those are pretty wide shoulders. I probably don't want my shoulders that wide because this is probably going to be another rabbit. I have so many rabbits. Wrap it around about twice. Just make sure you have all the same lengths here. Okay, now let's see who's longer here. These will be the arms. This will be the body, because these pipe cleaners are a little bit longer. Now when you cut off your pipe cleaners, make sure you save all those little pieces, because because you're making little animals and they can come in handy later. You want to shape sort of a torso. And think about the length of your creature. That's about right. Twist it. And now we have what we're going to use for here, the legs. Now to make the legs, I'm going to move the thigh up a bit so it's in the proper position of where a thigh should be. Here are my legs. Here are my arms. Now what? It's that easy. Now since this is going to be a rabbit, I want to consider the arms. How long should they be? I don't have any exact measurements for these because I'm making them in all different sizes, and you have to, that's why it's good to look at a picture. Besides that, if you want these to be more primitive like the antique toys, you're not going to be perfect. And I think a lot of you might have an advantage over me in that regard, because my problem is I'm a real detail person in my art and in my needle felting, and it's almost like I have to work to not get too intricate in my design. I have to try not to do that. And that's kind of tough, which you'll see in a couple of my examples that I've made here. But then we're going to cut it off where you think the arms should be. So being a slave to detail, I really have to really temper myself. So, and now if I'm going to make a rabbit, I like to go ahead and make a thigh like this. And that's not a very long rabbit foot. But since we're trying to be very primitive here, it doesn't matter. Same basic armature, except because this is going to be a little pony or a little horse, I gave a much longer neck here. And what I've done down here is, because I had a very long piece, I'm folding it over to be the same length as these. But I'm going to use that extra bit of pipe cleaner that's right here. I want this to be really flat because I want tiny, tiny hooves. But in order to give me a little more structure to work on, and I bought all this extra here, I'm going to give myself a thigh right there. So I'm going to be able to follow that as a thigh, the horse's thigh. And that was going to give me a little more bulk when I start to make the horse. And then I can take one of my little extra pieces that I cut off from something else and add a tail down here. I'll show you a little horse that I started working on. This just has a few layers of it on it. It's very simple. As you can see, it's pretty primitive, I'd say. I don't really have to do a whole lot more on it. And just paint it. It's got those nice little lumps and muscles that I like that just occur naturally with the cotton, depending on how you lay the cotton down on it. Now I'm going to show you how to do some feet on a goose. Here we have the armature of a swan or a goose. I'm going to follow that same basic rule again with a 12-inch pipe cleaner. Fold it in half. Make myself a little head. My goose, my duck, my swan. This will be a goose. I've always wanted to have some swans. The problem is, although we have a running creek out front, our pond only fills up a couple times a year. And swans, they really do need a lot of water to be happy. They wouldn't be happy in our creek, even though sometimes it's like a raging river. Now I want a long neck because I'm going to do a goose. And it's going to give me enough wire left. Yeah, that's long enough for a goose to make my body. Not only my body, but my goose tail. Right here. Okay. Now what if I want to put some feet on my geese? And I want to attach them directly to this. Now the geese have webbed feet. I'll take another, I guess another 12-inch pipe cleaner. I'll show you how to make a webbed foot. I'm going to make a triangle. Give myself about 1.5 inches here. I'm going to make a triangle. It's going to be a webbed goose foot. It's going to work for a duck or a swan. Swans have huge feet. Geese feet, they're pretty big too. Ducks, their feet aren't nearly as small. I'm going to leave myself this much twisted around. And there's the center of my foot. Now you don't have to do the webbed foot bit. You can just make a simple triangle without putting in that middle toe. And these would be just perfectly fine. But if you do put in the middle toe, you want a little more detail. You can see the little bones in the feet and even a little bit of wire sticking out the end, which makes the toenail. So that's kind of cute as well. So here we have the webbed 3-toed foot. And I'm going to just figure out the length of that particular leg. And I'm going to wrap it around the middle. In order to get these to stand, you have to do a little maneuvering after the creature has been made, because sometimes they just fall over. I've found that to be the case. Now on this side, you'll have to make the webbed toe, as this is hooked to the body, so you can sort of judge it by looking at the other foot. Here you go. Get your triangle going here. Like so. Wrap it around once with this one. And then bring your middle toe up. You don't want a bunch of bulk down here because you're going to be wrapping this with cotton. So if you have a nice pair of pliers, you can really smash this down a bit and then cut it off pretty close. Like that. All right. Now when you are doing cotton on it, you're just going to be working around these little so-called bones and making an indentation in the middle with your brush or your finger or whatever kind of tool you want to use. I have noticed that all kinds of things that you can use. You don't just have to use a brush. You can use your fingers. You can use sculpting tools. This wet cotton is absolutely remarkable. I wish that I had been doing this a long time ago because it's really fun. I think it's something I really am enjoying a lot. And I think I could actually get kind of addicted to it because I like it so much. Now you can take that middle piece, if you've got the room, and drop it down a little bit as your skeleton, because a goose, a swan, and a duck do have a very round chest. I'm going to show you another way to make the feet, because if you were with me in the last video, we made some chickens and some ducks and some geese, but we didn't put any feet on them. So if you want feet on them, now is the time to do it. You're going to do the same thing I did with this one as far as winding those webbed feet. You don't have to put the middle toe in at all, but if you want to, you can. But this time I am using brown floral wire, which is much thinner, and actually I like to use it a lot better for feet. And then what you can do is you can cut this off and you can poke a hole in the belly of your duck or your goose after you've made the feet. It's a lot easier to spread the cotton on these feet before you attach it to the body. So get those little feet made and get them all wrapped up. Cut it right here in the middle and then poke it up through the bottom of your duck or your goose or your chicken. So here we have the chicken bin and the goose bin. And here is a goose that did not get any feet in the last video. So I've made the skeleton feet. I'm going to wrap them with cotton. And then I'm going to cut them and I'm going to poke little holes in the bottom and I'm going to glue the feet in as I want them to be. Now to make chicken feet or bird feet, you can use either the floral wire or this is a really, really thin floral wire, which I think would be really good for little songbirds because you get some really, really delicate toes. I think these might be a little too delicate to hold up a plump hen or a rooster, so I'm going to save those for a bird. But I'm taking some of my brown floral wire. It's paper-covered wire is what it is. And I think the color is perfect for this. I'm going to twist these all together. I've got 3 pieces of equal size. Don't throw away any of those scraps. You might need them for something else. I've got 3 wires of equal length, and I'm just going to twist them all together. Until I get... You want to leave some at the end here because that's your foot. Just twist them all together until you get that much of a foot. You can always, oops, I'm stuck in my glove. Okay. Maybe one more twist on that one. There. Then you want to cut them of equal length. Cut those toes of equal length. And bend them up. And in my opinion, best way that I've figured out to apply them to the bird is by cutting this in the middle and just gluing it into the chest of the bird. Okay, there we have some chicken feet. I'm going to cut them right here, and I'm going to take my little hen. I'm going to find the right position on her belly. And when I find the right position, she's actually wet right now, so I don't want to do anything. Her belly is wet. I'm going to poke in a hole in there with a, yeah, she's wet right now. And poke a hole in there, and I'm going to glue the legs right up inside her with white glue. And then I will have a cute little standing hen who isn't standing very well. Okay, all right, come on now. Behave yourself. See, this is the problem. If you're not going to be hanging these, if you're going to be using them on a shelf or something, you have to figure out how to get them so that they're balanced and they're standing properly. And I just, there, okay. Now she's standing properly. But there's a cute little primitive, very primitive little hen. Cute little primitive little hen. Now there is no need to wrap the chicken feet. Once you put the legs inside the chicken's body, you might want to wrap up there at where the tummy comes into the legs and give them some feathers up there, but you don't need to wrap the feet because they're bare. However, you do want to wrap your goose foot if you want to get sort of a webbed foot here. So I've separated them. I cut them in half because it's a lot easier to work if they're not like this. And all I'm doing is I'm taking the really thin batting. I'm going to set my foot upon it. Make sure this is getting in the camera. And I'm going to start working it around the foot with my cornstarch. Like this. Got some water running in the background. If you're wondering, you know, people almost always ask me, somebody will almost always ask me in a video, why do you wear those gloves all the time? And the answer is really easy. I have really cold hands, and we live in a really cold house. That's simple. Now you can see the little skeleton underneath. Well, you don't want to see the little skeleton underneath, so we're going to put one more layer, a very fine layer on top of that one. Well, it's still wet. I hope there's not a shadow here that is blocking, showing you what I'm doing. I looked at so many videos on this particular craft. And most of the people that I found, the artists that do this, they're Russian. Yeah, there are some Americans doing it. I know that. I know the channels. But so many of them. It's very much a Russian craft. Actually, I think it started out as German for Christmas ornaments. And then it was put in all the ladies' magazines on how to do this. Back in the early 1900s, late 1800s, but I think it's a little more popular in the Edwardian times. And, oh, I'd love to find one of those old magazines with the directions on how to do this. Just keep on working at it until you have the right size foot. You want your feet to match, of course. And then you might want to take some kind of a tool like the end of your brush and sort of make indentations there for your feet, for your webbed foot. So you have that little webbed foot. Cool thing about this is you can really sculpt this. When it's wet, you really can sculpt this stuff. And then you're going to probably want to travel on up with your cotton when that's dry, probably using the cotton coil in a long strip, and cover the legs like I've done with this goose right here. And geese have pretty thick ankles. You don't have to worry about a really slender leg because they're pretty thick. So this needs to dry, and I will move on to something else. And when it comes to attaching ears and wings and chicken wattles and all the little accoutrements that animals have on their bodies, I have been doing it with this method by taking a piece of the cotton batting and stiffening it up. Obviously, this is still wet. Stiffening it up and then cutting the figures out of that. That's what I've been doing so far. I've used a lot of it up because this is all I have left. I've just cut out the shapes of little feathers. The shapes of wings. For this goose, for example. By the way, you can see that this goose has very simple feet. Nothing fancy about those feet. Just made a little U shape or a triangle shape to make these feet. And if you want to get a little more fancy on the wings, you can actually cut out feathers, little feather shapes. And I think I will go ahead and do that. And I am just going to glue this on the side of her with white glue. I just noticed that she already has a wing, but it's not very visible, so I'll give her another one. I'm just going to put it there in the front. Give her a double wing. And then you can probably fasten that down with your cornstarch mixture and smooth it on. I'm going to put a little bit more on the wing to really stiffen it up a little bit more. I think what I want to do next, I want to do some runner ducks. I think runner ducks are adorable. Whoops. Okay. Let it dry. Now, you'll notice that I haven't done much painting on any of these, and we're going to save that for another episode. And that's because I like to get everything done and then go to the painting. I like to do things in stages. So first I like to make all my armatures, and then I want to do all the fill-in, and then I will come to the painting. So that will not be in this video. These are just the basics to get you going, but if you do want to go ahead and start painting, you can use any kind of paint you want. Watercolor, acrylic. I think you can even use oil, although I wouldn't recommend that. What I've used so far on the few that I've actually started painting is really watered down watercolor because I want more of a translucent look, but I haven't finished any of these painted pieces at all. I just wanted to see what it would look like. Now let's say that you want to make some little ears. You're going to do the same thing. You're going to cut them out. You can either stiffen them up before you add them, or you can put them on nice and loose and wet, and then stiffen them up. Like with this mouse, I think I put the ears on while they were soft, and then I stiffened them with the cornstarch mixture. And you know what? If you get this stuff wet and you want to rework anything, because this mouse is still a little bit rough, if you want to rework anything, just get it wet. And you can absolutely get it pliable again and change the shape of the ears or anything else. And these are going to look a lot different when they're painted. I can promise you that. But this little mouse and several of the other pieces that I have here that I'm working on were all from that basic armature that I showed you. So here we have one that is going to be a rabbit. This is the little one that's going to be a chipmunk. Here is a squirrel. And this is all from the basic armature that we built today. On the fox, I simply cut out the little ears, glued them on, and smoothed them over to blend in with the fox's neck. Let's see, also, here's a sheep. I don't think her ears are big enough, but I made the little ears just by cutting the shape out with this batting, dried batting, and glued them on onto her head. Also, here we have a little hen with a little comb. She needs a wattle though, and this is another piece which was simply cut out from stiffened batting and glued onto her head. Her wing is a little bit fluffy on the end, and I kind of like that because it makes her a little bit different. Something else, some of these you'll notice are kind of soft and puffy, and some of them are stiff and hard. And there's reason for that. It depends on how you add the cotton. If you completely wet your cotton batting and then you add it, you're going to have a stiff, hard finish. If you glue only the bottom of the character and then you put soft cotton on top of it that hasn't been wet yet, you're going to end up with more of a soft and fluffy underbelly, for example, like this. You see, you can press that in. But this part, the neck, that's pretty stiff. That's pretty hard, and that's actually the way I want it to show you one more thing before we say goodbye. And that is the different ways the sheep turned out, because, as I said, I'm experimenting with different styles. So we have three different kinds of sheep here. This is a real simple sheep shape. Looks like a sheared sheep, actually. Not quite done with the face or the head yet. And they're only the silhouettes, as you know. They're not painted. They're going to be a lot different once they have their features and their paintings and their ribbons on their neck and their hats and everything else. But there's a very plain sheep, kind of more of the simple style that I like. There's another one, a little more ordinary. This one, however, I put some texture on. And I did that while the cotton was wet, just by using my brush and sort of moving the wet cotton batting all around. And so this is a completely different look on a sheep. But my goal, as I said before, is to make really small ones. So my goal is actually to get them about this small. This one doesn't have any ears yet, but I think this is really the look I'm trying to get. Kind of textured wool, this small size, and just the indication that it's a sheep without a whole lot of detail. I'll give you an example of the cotton application that I'm talking about. Now this is really pretty hard on this little mouse. He's pretty stiff, but I'd like to make him a little bit softer. So I'm just going to add, he's a dry mouse, completely dried out, but I'm just on the surface. I'm going to apply the cornstarch, and then I'm going to take a very small piece of the cotton batting, just a nice little puff, and I'm going to apply that. I'm going to apply that to his thigh, and I'm going to blend it in. This is going to dry a lot softer than what is currently on here. So when this cotton dries, we're going to have more of that little kind of where you can, Pillsbury Doughboy look, where you can press it in and it feels softer and it feels more pliable. Cushy, that's what I mean, cushiony. Okay, now that's all I'm going to do for the day. The next time we have a tutorial on this, we'll be painting these. In the meantime, just see what you can do about building those armatures and get really good at it, making all kinds of shapes and sizes. Now, in January, I don't do very many garden videos, obviously. It's freezing outside. There's really not a lot I can do. But don't worry, for those of you who are here for the gardening, we'll get back to it. Probably next week we'll have one section of the video will be something about gardening. So, but this is fun, and I really want to get this mastered. because I do really enjoy this craft. So we'll see you next time in Hop One Hollow. Let me know how you're doing on making these characters.